Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox. The Xbox One was a troubled console upon launch with a rough E3 announcement. Yet the launch lineup, widely forgotten today, had some really interesting titles. One of those was Ryse, Son of Rome. It was a Roman-themed hack-and-slash game made with Crytek, really pushing what the Xbox One was capable of at launch. I played through it recently, and let me give you some history, lasting impact, and my review. All footage was captured on an Xbox Series X, and I want to thank my YouTube channel members for their support. But let's go ahead and hop into this one. After researching the history of Ryse, I was surprised just to see how far back it went. Crytek, the developer of Ryse, opened in 1999, and in 2004, when they launched Far Cry, they were deemed a studio that could pull off technical marvels, a status they would hold on to when Crysis was released a few years later. CryEngine was a game engine that they crafted and was set to show stunning visuals for the time. In 2006, the team was looking into the future, and the motion-based controller called Project Natal, or as it's known now, Kinect, was in development and unknown to the public. The team had envisioned an action game for Project Natal that would pair with an MMO they wanted to make. It was a medieval fantasy-style game called Kingdoms, which was a first-person Kinect game, making you use melee attacks with your hands. The idea was thrown out to Microsoft in 2009, which Vice President Phil Spencer liked, though they turned down the MMO idea. At E3 2010, this game was announced as codenamed Kingdoms. No gameplay was shown off, and it seemed like there was some Kinect turmoil in the background. They didn't know if they wanted it to be fully Kinect, halfway, or no Kinect at all. They eventually decided on making it partially usable with Kinect. In this time, the team would reform the medieval idea into making a Roman-themed game. In 2011, when shown off at E3, it gained the title Ryse. In this trailer, you see that it is a fully Kinect game and is focused on using your body for every motion. The game was notably absent in 2012, and rumors were starting to spread in places that it was going to lose its Kinect features. In 2013, it would be announced that Ryse would be a launch title later that year for the new Xbox One console. The game would have Kinect functionality, but lightly. It was mainly a controller-based experience, and it would release alongside the launch of the Xbox One. On November 22, 2013, Ryse, Son of Rome would release with the Xbox One. I, personally, did not play this game at launch, and did not touch it till I planned this review. It was a game that was always on my radar, but I was never interested in it enough to start it up. Yet, as the Xbox One starts to get older, I've been interested in revisiting its start, so I played through this one recently, and let me break down how I felt about it, starting with the plot.
As we can be.
Safe. Yes, safe, thank God. But you... What family? What's your name, soldier?
Marius. But my name is of no import. My story, however, is...
Ryse is set up to be a cinematic experience right from its outset. The intro is a huge spectacle of barbarians attacking Rome, and you play the general Marius Titus. In all of this fighting, you take the Roman emperor to safety, and while awaiting the end of the attack, you relay the story of your life to him. This being the plot of the game, the tapestry of Marius's life. A storytelling device that we've seen before, but here feels like a nice homage to classic swords and sandal stories of old. I would say it's less like Gladiator and more like Spartacus or Quo Vadis, which I only bring up just to show off some of my Laserdisc collection. I think this epic Roman plot isn't seen much in gaming, so I think this has a good basis here. As far as overall plot goes, I think it's fun. This game is a breezy 5 to 6 hour run through, so the plot is told pretty fast for a game. Each chapter showing Marius's rise and fall, as well as a tale of vengeance. It's written well, and I think if you like a plot that feels like an epic, you'll have something to appreciate here. Though I would have appreciated a more grounded tale than what we got here. I won't give too much away, but Roman gods do interact with the story, giving this game a supernatural feel. It's key to the plot, but it's one that I felt was unnecessary and could have just been the story of his life. And I think that would have been just as exciting. Also, characters are an issue here. I do like Marius, he's rugged and stoic, which is perfect, but the barbarians have a few key characters that have zero personality. By the end of the game, you're supposed to have an emotional showdown with one of these barbarians, and really it just falls flat. Actually, the final act is where this game falls flat for me as a whole. It's a bit messy and rushed and easily could have been stretched out a little bit more. It feels tacked on to the end, and the gameplay doesn't help, which I'll go into a little bit more next. The ending is at least satisfying, and I came out of this one with a fun story overall. It's got an epic Roman plot you'd come to expect, and despite some issues, it's at least entertaining. Ryse is a hack-and-slash game with light troop command elements. Most of the game will have you moving area to area, fighting enemies and moving on. Sometimes you might command a squad, but these moments are fairly limited. The combat in Ryse is surprisingly fun and maintains a great flow to its combat that makes it a blast. You have a mix of light and heavy hits, and you hit these buttons to a rhythm to take on your enemies. You'll have different classes of enemies, where some might need heavy hits or a shield bash to let down their guard. It's a lot like the Arkham games and has the same smoothness to it as well as counterattacks. This style of combat was prolific at this time, but it does feel great to use. I felt powerful, and along with earning XP, you can funnel these into getting more health or more power. This is something that spices up the game, as well as the executions. There are moments where the enemy might be hurt, and you can use hits to kill them. They will light up certain colors that correspond to buttons, and you hit these in sequence. It's pretty much a glorified QuickTime event, but for the first half of the game it works. I think rhythmically it's timed well with combat, and never lasts long enough to add tedium to the fights. I think it works with the flowing nature, and makes for something unique. Unfortunately, like the plot, the gameplay loses me in the last half. What makes this so entertaining is the amount of enemies thrown at you. Counter and trading hits and executions is fast and stylish. It really works when you're ganged up on. In the finale, they focus a lot on boss battles, which are the same fights but just longer. Doing these over and over becomes tedious in the end. The boss fights are easy but stretched out to its longest possible amount, making for a tedious ending. Just fighting one person for too long and the rhythm is lost. Throw in that the finale is mostly quick time events with no fighting, and you have something that feels rushed and not entertaining. I will say for 80% of the game, the combat is great. It's a bit repetitive, and that is a common criticism, but I thought it felt cool enough to keep my interest. Also, the game is short, so it's not around long enough to become dull. Stretch this out to a 15-hour experience, and I feel like I could feel differently. I just wish the ending was handled better overall. The troop commanding portions are fun, but they are underbaked. It's you just pointing out what section a troop should defend, using connect or holding a button to fire arrows, or an arrow deflection minigame. That one stood out to me the most because you'll go down long corridors and you'll block arrows as a group, and shoot arrows whenever you're free to do so. It's simple but breaks up the game nicely. I do wish there was more focus on being a general and commanding troops, and that's not where the game lies, and more lies on one man and his actions. That's about it as far as gameplay goes. You walk, attack, repeat, and sometimes deflect arrows. It's not complex, and I don't mind that. If the combat is fun enough to keep me going the whole time, then it's doing something right. It's just there are some things missing that could have made this more fun. More enemy variety would have been nice to vary the combat, more troop commands, and a tighter ending with a focus on huge battles over boss fights. It's a game with issues in its gameplay, but I still think it's fun. As an aside, there is a multiplayer co-op mode. These are modes where you fight in a coliseum against AI enemies with a partner online, and I actually got to play some, and I thought it was okay. I don't think it adds much to the game since it's just a wave fighting mode, but it's fine. I feel like a competitive mode here would have been far more interesting. In 2013, this game must have been mind-blowing with how great these environments look. It's CryEngine, so you know there's going to be some strong visuals here, and even more than 10 years later, this game is striking. It's most notable in its environment. The scale and size of them are intense, especially when you're in Rome. You see tall colosseums and sightlines littered with buildings. These moments are cinematic and showcase how much detail is thrown on screen. This is also notable in the Siege on the Sea, where ships are crashed into the beach and waves are rolling in. There's debris and you walk inside skeletons of ships. There's so much detail packed onto the screen and it's impressive. City streets have small details, making them feel full, and if I played this in 2013, I would have felt like this was the true definition of a next-generation release. The lighting is beautiful too, with nice shadows and rays of light being cast down. It even adds a nice, eerie mood to a later campfire section of the story. Though this game does feature motion blur, which I honestly don't love, and it can't be turned off, so if you're like me and the blur gives you a little bit of a headache, you'll feel that here. The visual effects are great though, and the amount of blood and gore is intense. People get limbs and heads sliced clean off, and it's here in detail. The character models are good too, but not the most outstanding part of the game. They do feel like a leap ahead from the last gen, but I find the lip sync and mouth movements to be a little silly. The way they move, it feels a little unnatural, and I've never loved this style. Yet, that's just a nitpick. I think it does look great. If there's one thing that Ryse completely sticks the landing on, it's its visuals.
The Emperor must die.
And he will. But we must save Rome first. I need you now, Marius. Fight for your father. Fight for your legion. Fight for Rome.
For all of the audio, I can say it's a solid experience, yet the music here is incredible. This game had a group of composers behind it, and they all did fantastic work. It's precisely what you would expect from an epic of this scale. It's full of pomp when it's in Rome. It feels enormous and regal, yet the battle sequences have a loud orchestral sound. It's catchy and tense and fits the fight so well. It has a full orchestra too, so there's a lot of instruments and parts. It pushes that cinematic feeling to another level, especially when you're wearing headphones. The voice acting overall is solid. I would say nothing too notable, but nothing bad. Everyone performs well, and they help add characterization to most of the characters here. Marius is voiced by John Hopkins, who I think is a solid pick. It matches well with the general sound work in the game. I personally love the sound of the loud crowds in areas like the Colosseum or the crashing waves on the sea section. The general destruction and clangs of war around you are immersive, and it never feels like it misses a beat. The sound work in general is well handled. I went into Ryse a little skeptical. I had not heard many good things about it. Yet, after playing through it, I think it's a good time. It unfortunately has some issues. Length is not something I would normally complain about. I do like short games, but this one does have a lack of things to do after 6 hours, meaning that if you paid full price here, you probably felt duped. And now that you can play it through Game Pass like I did, it's a much different experience. I can appreciate what's here, and the combat is fun. It may lose itself in the end with bad boss fights and a weaker finale, but it was at least a good time most of its playthrough. I wish it was stretched out a bit more and there was more enemies, but it's entertaining and never dull. The visuals are fantastic, as is the music. I think we have a game here with issues, but it's still entertaining. Flawed, but fun. And before I get into a ranking list, I'm not ranking this one quite yet. I want to wait till I do a few more Xbox One reviews since I haven't done many on the channel, but be on the lookout for that in my next Xbox One review. Ryse Son of Rome opened to pretty rough reviews with a 60 average on Metacritic. IGN gave it a 6.8, saying it was a spectacle but never gets anywhere interesting with its combat. GamesRadar gave it a 3.5 out of 5, stating that the combat was satisfying, and that it was beautiful, but it was too light on content. Official Xbox Magazine gave it a 7 out of 10, saying it was fun, but needed more variety. Though the story of reviews don't end there. Machinima would actually get fined by the FTC because they were paid to make positive reviews by Microsoft, and Machinima failed to disclose this info to viewers in their videos, which is required by the FTC, leaving this era of Xbox reviews, especially from this outlet, in a weird state. Microsoft didn't get fined because it was up to Machinima to tell audiences about the payment. But I'd still say Microsoft isn't doing great here because they paid for specifically positive reviews, which is a bad look. As for the Ryse IP after the fact, there were some rumors spread that Ryse 2 would never happen due to strained relations with Crytek and Microsoft, who own the IP. Yet the CEO of Crytek dismissed all of these notions, saying everything was good with Microsoft and they simply weren't planning on doing a sequel unless the timing was right. And it doesn't seem like the timing has ever been right, because we have not heard anything about a new entry. As far as public opinion goes, from people I know, this game doesn't have a great reputation. I've heard people call this one a serious misstep, and it's not remembered too well. It is playable on PC as well as Game Pass now though, so more people have the opportunity to play it. On Backlogged, it holds a 2.9 with over 6,000 plays. Looking through reviews, it feels like a lot of mixed opinions, which goes in line with its legacy. I'd only recommend checking it out for cheap, or if you have Game Pass, which is not a bad way to spend a few hours. But that does wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Also comment below with any Xbox One games you want me to talk about or any memories of this game. Subscribe to keep up with the retro Xbox content, and be sure to check out my second channel, Camp Extras, for more retro game talk. And I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you here next time at Camp Xbox.